What if I told you that a solution to one of the world's biggest challenges is also creating a new multi-trillion-dollar global industry? We're talking about the business of capturing and burying carbon. Okay, let's get into it. I mean, it is a huge question, right? Every single year, our industries are pumping out these absolutely staggering amounts of carbon dioxide. We all know we have to do something about it, but the scale of the problem, it's just mind-boggling. So what in the world are we going to do with all of it?
Well, the hard reality is that for some really critical industries, think steel, cement, petrochemicals, CO2 emissions are just an unavoidable part of the process itself. You can't just slap a solar panel on it and call it a day. These are what we call the hard-to-abate sectors, and they are a massive piece of this whole climate puzzle.
And this is where a technology called CCUS comes into play. You can think of it like a giant high-tech filter on a smokestack that literally grabs the CO2 before it ever hits the atmosphere. Then, that captured carbon is either used to make other products, or, and this is the important part for our story, it's put into a permanent storage locker deep, deep underground. Now, you'd probably think the leaders in this new carbon storage game would be the usual suspects, right? The green tech hubs in Europe or maybe California, but get this. The region that's emerging as a potential world-class hub for all this is actually the oil-rich nations of the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC. And yeah, that leads us to the very obvious and kind of ironic question. Why on earth would the countries that literally built their fortunes on pulling carbon out of the ground suddenly be leading the charge to put it right back in? Well, the answer is this fascinating mix of geology, economics, and, of course, geopolitics. Okay, so it turns out that decades of exploring for oil and gas have given the Gulf states this massive, unseen advantage. They've basically hit the geological jackpot. Their old, depleted oil and gas fields are like these perfect, pre-made containers, just waiting to be filled up with CO2. They're secure, they're well understood, and they're conveniently located right next to all the big industrial centers that are producing the emissions in the first place. And the scale here, it's just hard to wrap your head around. One major study estimates the Gulf has the potential to store 170 gigatons of CO2. To give you some perspective, that's enough space to store nearly 230 times years' worth of the entire region's current emissions. It's an almost unimaginably huge resource.
And let's be clear, this is not just some environmental project. It's a massive economic opportunity. We are talking about a potential $44 billion being added to the GCC economy every single year by 2050 just from storing carbon and exporting related low-carbon products like hydrogen. And this isn't just about abstract billions of dollars. It's about people. This new carbon economy could create nearly 250,000 brand new jobs in the region. That's a huge deal for transforming their economies for a completely new era.
And you might be thinking this is all some distant, futuristic dream, but it's not. There's a plan, and it is already in motion. The first hubs are expected to be up and running by 2026, and they're going to scale up right through 2030 and beyond. You see, the Gulf states are moving this fast because there's this huge external force that is completely rewriting the rules of global trade.
And that force is a new kind of trade rule. You can think of it as a global carbon tariff. And it's a mechanism that is forcing every export-heavy economy, especially in the Gulf, to completely rethink its entire business model. So it's called a Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. The idea is actually pretty simple. If a country, let's say in the EU, has strong climate rules, it doesn't want its local industries to be undercut by cheaper imports from places with weaker rules. So it slaps a fee on those imports based on their carbon footprint. It's a carbon tariff. And this right here changes everything. Before CBAM, goods competed on price and quality. Simple. After CBAM, they compete on their carbon footprint. All of a sudden, every single producer in the world has a direct financial reason to lower their emissions if they want to keep selling their stuff in Europe, and pretty soon, probably the US too. And here is the Gulf's second, and kind of shocking, advantage. It turns out their oil is actually cleaner to produce. Because of their unique geology and big investments in things like reducing gas flaring, the carbon intensity of a barrel of oil from, say, Saudi Arabia is way lower than the global average. Now, under a CBAM system, that suddenly makes their oil cheaper and a whole lot more competitive. So this new reality is kicking off a global race to build an entirely new kind of supply chain. I mean, if you can capture carbon, you now need a way to move it from point A to point B. And that means new ships, new pipelines, new port terminals, all of it designed specifically to handle CO2. And right now we're seeing two totally different strategies emerge around the world.
In Europe, they're going hardware first. They're building the specialized ships and the big storage sites like the Northern Lights project in Norway. But in Asia, they're taking more of a framework-first approach. They're focusing on getting all the policies, the port agreements, and the legal rules in place before they build the expensive stuff. It's like a classic tortoise and the hare situation, and honestly, it's anyone's guess who's going to win this race.
So the final, and maybe the most important piece of this entire puzzle, is how this new carbon economy is completely redrawing the map of global power. We are literally moving from a world that was shaped by who has access to oil to a new one that's going to be shaped by who has the ability to manage carbon.
I mean, this visual pretty much says it all. The energy map of the last 100 years was all about who was producing and who was consuming fossil fuels. The new map? It's about who can produce low-carbon goods and who has the space to store CO2. It is a fundamental shift in what energy security even means.
And this is creating a brand new geopolitical divide. On one side, you have a potential low-carbon bloc. Think nations like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. With their low-carbon oil and massive storage capacity, their economic interests suddenly line up with Western nations that are imposing these carbon tariffs. But on the other side, you've got producers with more carbon-intensive oil, and they might be pushed to strengthen their ties with non-CBAM markets like China and India. We're watching a major reshuffling of global alliances happen in real time.
So, it really leaves us with this final, critical thought. For the last century, the rules of the global economy were written in oil. Now, as carbon dioxide itself becomes a commodity, something to be shipped, traded, and stored, an entirely new system is being born. And the biggest question of all is, who is going to write the rules this time?